Hi girls, we're here for Alex and his sisters, and I'm Alex McCann, a social media company based in South Manchester, and here today with Sally Penny from Women in the Law. Sally describes herself on her LinkedIn profile as barrister, keynote speaker, leader, NED, which is non-exec director, and proud mother. She founded Women in the Law UK and hosts the Talking Law podcast. And Sally writes extensively and is passionate about the law and access to the law. She's also a not multiple award winning, but she is multiple award winning, but she's written several books, the latest book being a children's book called Rosie and the Unicorn. And she also volunteers on a local radio station, AllFM, with a show called FM about loneliness and isolation. So today we're going to talk about equality in the law. We're going to talk about visibility, and we're going to talk about being an author. So welcome, Sally.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. You really have got a wide variety of sisters on here.
We have. Our sisterhood is very, very vibrant. Normally,
Absolutely.
obviously, if we're doing this face-to-face, we'll obviously go and be cheesy, we'll do high fives, and it'll be a bit 70s, 80s throwback. But we're going to keep it professional and keep on the interview. So, obviously, there's so much to talk about. First of all, we're going to start off obviously what you do as a job, which is the law. I want to start with that. I want you to talk about why you got into it, what your parents did as jobs, and also the barriers to entry for sort of a woman in the law in the early days. So talk us through your career, potted history.
Well, I got into the law by accident. I didn't know anyone in the law. My parents are immigrants. They're professional people, doctors, who came to England not to stay, to study and leave, and they ended up having 5 children, of which I'm the eldest, and so we ended up staying. So the plan for me was to read medicine, and some of my siblings are in medicine. I think they would have liked actually one of everyone, a dentist, a doctor, whatever other medical professions there are. I discovered sort of quite late on I wasn't very good with blood, so that ruled me out, so I didn't take up my place to read medicine. I think a bit of a no-brainer. Luckily, I was bright enough to realise that. But really, the truth of it was I used to enjoy the Rumpole of the Bailey books. Now, there's a variety of people here. You can Google Rumpole. And I thought he was an inspirational role model in law. For me, he's an overweight white man. And these books were all about representing people who got into all sorts. He was a barrister. He was a criminal barrister, and he only defended at the Old Bailey. And John Mortimer, the author, of course, was a barrister. And I enjoyed reading those books. We weren't allowed to watch much television, really. I don't know whether it's because of African heritage, but education was crucial in my family. There was any chance of any kind of apprenticeship or anything. That's just the way we were brought up. And it's very clear also, that education meant that you had to be better than everybody else because of prejudice. And certainly, as a black doctor, my father found it very hard to progress because he was a talented surgeon. But it was very much the days where he'd turn up to interviews. Penny is my name. I haven't changed it. That's me. I got it from him. Essentially, he'd just be marched out of the room because they couldn't, they'd say to him, "You're in the wrong room." And he'd be saying, "No, I am Mr. Penny." So I got into law because I've always had a sense of justice. I actually wanted to be a policewoman, and my parents said I was too short. And so I was gutted. I was like, oh, what else can I do? And I am short. You can't tell here, but I think anybody who's seen me in real life will know. So, yeah, that was my initial career aim, justice and equality, really. And in terms of barriers to the law as a woman and as a black woman, I don't like the term BAME, but if you know people who are BAME, ask them if they like the use of that term. I don't. I prefer the term BAME, which I say publicly. BAME is a term that's invented in England to describe black and ethnic minorities. And if you ask any minority, most of them will say we don't like the term. So if you want to group the minorities together, say minority groups. So as a black and a woman from an ethnic background, it was hard. It was more my gender, I would say, actually, more than anything. And it's hard just to enter the legal profession. One, I never fancied a solicitor. Conveyancing, gosh, that's why we all pay so much to move house, right? They do so much brilliant work, but it's not for me. It's quite boring. And so I wanted to be an advocate, the voice for those who get caught up in the legal profession or in the law, really. And so to enter was very hard. It's always been hard. It was a profession really not designed, but for, men who wanted a hobby. So you came from a very wealthy background and you dealt cases because of the intellectual capacity. And so for me, I discovered that very early on. I have to admit, it was only going for interviews for what's called pupillage. That's a training part for barristers. For solicitors, it's called a training contract, or the legal training aspect. That I realized that people didn't look like me. People didn't, represent really me. And that was hard, full stop, actually. I applied for loads. But even worse was a dear friend of mine who's from Liverpool, who's white. And she barely got any interviews for anything. And she was a bit more restrictive. So I was the opposite. I had good CV, I was bright, and I would go for all these interviews. And their second interviews not get down. So that was hard. But once I got into the bar and started pupillage, I got on very well, really, because I just used the ethos I was brought up with, which is to be better than everybody else, because I had a double deficit, if you like. My father, they call it that now, being a woman and then having another characteristic. So now we use it if somebody's got a neurodiverse condition and their agenda. But women in society have the deficit. And secondly, if they've got another intersectional aspect, they have that as well. So really, I just worked hard, probably too hard. I know perfectionism is a trait for women. We want to get everything right. And I'm guilty of that. There's some new stuff going on now where we need to really be saying good is good enough. We don't need to be outbeating our colleagues. I must admit, I find that hard because I've not been brought up with that mentality. And I do like everything just so in the workplace. And I suspect as business owners, which a lot of people are here, it's important to be able to let go or delegate. Social media, God, get Alex to do it. It's like, geez, it's a nightmare. How many training sessions have I been on with Alex? And I still can't.
So yeah, Sally, you mentioned then, I think that's the first taking point away. If anyone's sort of posting about this on Twitter or LinkedIn later, the double deficit, I've never heard that phrase before, and it's a really interesting concept. So we've got about half an hour in total, so we've still got quite a few more questions to go through, Sally. So one thing you said that just mentioned then that you sort of thought that the gender was the more difficult part of obviously your background launching a career in law. How did Women in the Law UK come about? Because I know I've spoken at your events loads of times, but I don't know when it started, its background. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I started it because gender wasn't really an issue for me until I had children. And when I had children, I've got lots of really good mates who are women, but they don't want to go to anything with women in the title, and they don't want their gender to be, that's okay if that's what they want to do. But they would say things like, ditch your sports car, you're going to need a people carrier, or, buddy up with X. Some of these are women in the legal profession and in business. And so that was all very useful. But actually, it came about because one of my children was diagnosed with leukemia, cancer. And it was a really crappy time. I can't swear on here, obviously. And I thought, well, what if you were just thinking about skills, progressing in your career, learning stuff? That was the worst time of my life and my family's life. But what if you just wanted a bit of escapism to learn skills so you can progress on your own accord? And at the time, I was on the committee for Association of Women Barristers, which is an association going for loads of years. It's brilliant. Very London-centric, a bit cliquey. Certainly there, we talk about gender and diversity. You come from the north and go to something in London, crikey, you feel like you've just arrived from the boat. And so I wanted to set something up that was a bit fun, wasn't in your face. And so it started with an annual dinner, which was for lawyers, some business people. We'd have a speaker, and then I tracked everybody who attended to see what happened to their careers. And I think it's something like 83% had career progression. Now, some of them left the law, and sometimes that's okay for people. They've set up businesses, they've set up firms, their own law firms. And so that carried on. And then actually the demand and supply meant that so I set that up just as my son started his treatment, foolishly, actually, thinking about it. And then it sort of just did the once a year thing. And then in about 2017, 2018, the era had changed and we needed more, really. We needed more organizations. I felt, I'm still on the vice president of the Association of Women Barristers. But
How many members have you got?
So now, I don't know, there's 3,000 or something people on the newsletters. We're not very good at tracking people because a lot of it is free. So I think there's about 800 people who are members. And then, because we basically have a large audience, but we're not very good at conversion. So, people email to say, can we have a membership form? And then some volunteer gets back to them eventually. So that's not a great model, I'm sure. So that's how that came about. And it's about skills. We're not doing gin tasting or Zumba. They're all fantastic things, but there's no learning in it for us. And we want to learn also from business owners, like people on here, because I think as a profession, we are traditional, we are a bit antiquated, and we are very behind. And so I wanted us to get on with the times and learn what the rest of the world is doing for our sector.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's obviously, I've spoken about 3 or 4 of the events, both virtually and in real life as well. And the very good events, very well attended. So we talked about women in the law. Obviously, the other side of things, obviously, Black Lives Matter has been talked about a lot over the past 2 months. Would you say in your career there have been incidences of both obviously overt racism and then there's what I'd call the subtle, more hidden side of racism? So talk us.
Yeah.
How have you dealt with it?
Okay. So, I had some racism. Oh, God, we'd be here all day. And anybody who says they don't have racism or they don't see colour, it's utter, and I know this has been recorded, so I won't say my true intentions. It's nonsense. I've been asked to interpret for people because I've been the only black barrister in the courtroom. In fact, the only woman. Everybody else was male. All my colleagues were men. And I use humour a lot. That's become a bit of a famous story. In Liverpool, in February, in fact, just before lockdown, I rocked up to the Crown Court to deal with a very serious case, which I won't name here, and which I was prosecuting. The court was delayed because I hadn't arrived, because I was being detained effectively at the security. And now when we go to court, if you see barristers, they're like, we carry trolleys. We look like trolley dolly air hostesses because it's got our wig and gowns in it. Now we've all got Macs like what I'm using now, but we still need our kit if you're in certain sectors. And so the chap said to me, what are you here for? And I was a bit sort of, I don't walk around with a chip on my shoulder, but you don't want to get on the wrong side of me, right? So I said, I'm counsel, because I was thought, what a peculiar question. And counsel is the name that we are referred to. Judges call us counsel. If you work at a court, you'll know counsel are the barristers, right? And so we said, you're here for council tax. I said, no, I don't think so. I didn't think council tax was even an offence anymore. But I am here for the robing room. And let me know if the lift is in. This chap just wasn't having it. Now, let me tell you, I was in a very expensive coat. I wasn't wearing one of my scruffy yellow ones or the dog walking coats you keep warm. And even if I was, so what? Yeah? Totally. So I just had to say to him, listen, phone the judge and say that Miss Penny is here. She's delayed because you're holding me up. And so the case won't be able to start on time. And so then he was quite shocked. No apology. So I dealt with, and that's purely because of my race, because the solicitor I was with was fuming and was going like this. Steve was like, no, I'm with her. I'm here because she's our advocate. We're going to be late, blah, blah, blah. And so that was just a very simple incident there. So there have been loads of those. And then there have been other nuances and very discreet ones. And some of them are things like, and how have I got over them? I'll come to it. But some of them are often like, in the legal profession, we're not transparent. And the people who decide who is meritors are often the people who have the true power. And so when we look at seniority in our professions and the lack of women in leadership roles, it's a non-brainer, isn't it? If a bloke goes to say, I'm going for this, yeah, fine, I'll support your reference. When women go, they go, well, I don't think I've seen you enough. You're like, really? So there are lots of really subtle things that go on. It's not like in America where their racism is really obvious, or indeed, let's be brutal, South Africa where you've got signs, or had signs saying no blacks. Now they're quite nuanced, aren't they? Because still the restaurants the black people don't really go to dine in, despite the laws having been removed. And so how have I got over it? I've developed my own skills, really. One is humor. It's not for everyone, but if you say something that is offensive, I call it out and I use humor. And when everyone in the room is laughing at something you've said, you don't want that, because, lawyers are really nosy and we love funny things. Yeah. And we recount stories. They're really gossipy, so no one wants that. That's the first thing I developed. The second thing I developed really was not every battle is worth the fight. Some of it, you've just got to let it go and pick the ones that are worth fighting, because life is short and it's so draining, calling out sexism, racism, anti-Semitism, all of it all the time. But I don't say that because I'm a real advocate in silence, really, is complicit. When people do nothing, like lots of people will say, I'm not racist. And you're like, okay, but are you anti-racist? And that requires a positive action. It doesn't mean shouting and going on videos all the time. A friend of mine has done a very good video for Bite Size. People can watch it. It's 2 minutes. And it's when things happen and people discuss afterwards, oh, wasn't that awful? Or, oh, I would never do that. But they do nothing about it. Being anti-racist is taking positive action and just going, I was at an event where all the black people were put on a table together. Now, I wouldn't mind, but there was 500 people and there were 10 black people. Okay? Yeah, just have a think for a moment. If you're in a breakout room and you put all the black people in the room, well, the algorithms must be so clever they can detect the skin color of the people, right? So there are lots of little nuances that go on. No, if I'm at an event and there are 10 men, don't put them all on a table to shame them. We need the men. Of course we do. Crikey, there are more of us. Put one on each table so they can actually talk to intelligent women who are running their own businesses and they've got something to say. No, don't put them all. And most men, if they go to an event and that happens, they come up to you all the time and say, oh gosh, yeah, we're not very diverse. Most leaders, they just don't know how to give the conversation. Race is an uncomfortable subject. And so not everybody wants to talk about it. I'm comfortable talking about it. If you want to talk about race, get me to come and talk to you about it. But if we don't have the conversations, then we're all really scared. We don't actually know what to do. We don't know whether we can touch people's hair. We don't know whether to say people of color. And it's all really offensive, blah, 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 blah. It's all in our society and it's everywhere. And if you really want to learn, then ask the conversations. Ask how to pronounce people's name. Don't make assumptions. And it's hard because we've never had the conversations in England. We've never had them. I've got loads. Most of my friends are white. We've never had them. But I don't believe that it's enough just to say to our friends, it's up to you, Nick Brown, or it's up to you, Melis, it's up to you, Debbie, it's up to you to find out about race and then come and talk to me about it. Actually, my view is, I think it's okay for you to ask to have the conversation because you want to learn, or ask, what can I do? And the reason it's important for me, I know I've gone on a bit on that subject, is that the young people, the kids we're bringing up now, they get it, they watch it, they hear it. It's in the background when we're all listening to Radio 4 or whatever. They know about the protests. So even if we're not conversing with them, they're really engaged in it. This is other things like vegetarianism and veganism. We might not be, but our kids are like, I'm now veggie because I don't like. And we're like, what? What about Sunday roast? We need to have the conversations because they are so much more informed and ready to have the conversations than us. So that's my view on Black Lives Matter. It's not new. It's a bit of a trend, I think, for people who've discovered it, but we need to carry on with the conversations.
Yeah, definitely. And what I'm aware of from chatting about this is literally I've got about 12 questions here. We've done 4 of them. So no, 3 of them
Sorry,
so
I'll just
far.
give one line answers.
Yeah, we could talk for like hours. So what I'm going to do, we're up to question 4 out of 12.
Okay, I'll just give one line answer.
Try and keep the answer like 1 line, 1 minute. So you always come across as very confident. For any women just starting out in a career in business, because there is on this call, what advice would you give in a short answer?
I would say I'm not always confident. Listen, I just have the values I want to stick to, which is to embrace everyone. I would say learn as much as possible. There's so much free stuff going out there. Go to as much as you can, although it can feel like a full-time job. You can spend all day on Zoom, couldn't you? Then have a meltdown when it's your book club. Like, oh gosh, learn as much as possible. Take advantage of, stuff like the Growth Hub. Look at some of the leaders. Ask people. Say, I'm a woman in business. I can't really afford your membership stuff. Can I come? Yeah. Be comfortable asking about those. Approach some of those leaders. In terms of confidence, I think it's something that comes. No one's ever confident, really. Look, I interviewed Gina Miller on my podcast. She's a, millionaire, billionaire, whatever your views are about Brexit. You've got to admire that woman, right? And she's got a really interesting story. And she's not always confident, actually. So I wouldn't say I'm already confident. I have a lot of energy, but I get my energy from people. So I would say keep going. It's going to feel like you want to drop out after a while, but you have to keep going. I think business is just hard. And now we're in this pandemic, it's even harder. So try and get some learnings outside perhaps of the groups that you go to.
Fantastic. And as well as confident, I know you said you're not always confident, but one thing I always consider you to be is very visible and very active in terms of showing up. So was building a personal brand, and there's a personal brand photographer on here, but was building personal brand something you thought of, or something that kind of just happened because of you're being you?
I think I came on one of your trainings, Alex, and I was like, I'd like Women in the Law events to all be free for everyone, and I want loads of people to sponsor it so that my women can just come and it's free. And you were like, well, you've got 36 followers, so that's not going to happen. I know, he was brutal, right? Let me tell you, he was and so I thought, oh, right, yeah, he's right. So, no, I don't know if I've ever had a brand or whatever. If I'm honest, look, I practice in law. We're very discreet. You never hear me talking about my cases, ever. Outside of that, I'm just kind of, wearing my pink jackets. I've just taken off my court jacket and doing what I can. Because I really, when I'm 70, or if I live to that long, I'd like to just retire and not do anything. So I think we get one life, and I'm doing what I can now to be visible and talk about the subjects that matter to me, really. So, yeah, that's what I've been trying to do. So I don't know about personal. We have loads of personal branding people come on Women in the Law and tell us all this fabulous stuff. I don't really know how to make it work that.
I think just turning up like you do and doing all the multiple things that we're going to talk about actually in a second. So the other thing I looked at on your LinkedIn profile was I saw no less than 19 honours and awards.
Oh, my God.
So, I mean, I think you've truly embraced the phrase award-winning. I didn't realise exactly how many awards you had. But, I mean, again, has that helped you in your career, the fact that you've been acknowledged for all these various accolades?
No, people just say you do too much. And I just think, oh, bollocks to you. You have to edit that out. No, I think that every time I win an award, it's for all the women who are on here who maybe haven't got awards, who work hard, and there's nobody saying, well done. And I use this phrase all the time when I'm on LinkedIn. When I win, you win, and we all win. Because it means that hardworking mums, not everyone's got kids, I know, but you've all got businesses you're trying to run, or the women I deal with and talk to every day, businesses they're trying to run, caring responsibilities, social care. For goodness sake, our parents have looked after us for so long. Now we've got to look after them. And it is mainly the women. I mean, I'm sure you're a really helpful brother, Alex, but most of the caring, social care, if you look at the evidence, is by women. So even if you haven't got kids, your kids have left, that's what happens. So when I win awards, it's not because I've got a trophy cabinet. I haven't. I think most of them are actually broken. But it's just something to say, the hard work that maybe that I've done, but it's really for other people. It's for the people who are trying to run their businesses, get the exposure and pay their bills. That's what those awards mean to me. So, you know, multi-award winning, what does it actually mean? Who knows? But I'm always thrilled to be nominated or shortlisted. But I would say for the raising of profile, you were talking about branding before, I would encourage that the people actually nominate each other, enter awards, have the right information, because there are people who look, I'm not talking about the awards where they say, oh, are you going to sponsor a table? No one wants that, and I've never done that. Crikey, God, no. I just think that, you know, when you want to raise the profile of your business in a different way, there are people who pay attention to those sort of things, and so it might be worth getting into the practice of writing about yourself and your business.
No, it definitely helps. I've won various small business awards in Altrincham, and I've won the best social media company in Manchester, and it definitely helps raise your profile. So if anyone's on here, 100%, if an award comes up, make sure someone's nominated you for it, definitely.
Yeah, and also there's Alex, there's Northern Power Women Awards. I'm not a judge on it anymore because I just don't have the time. But they are all about businesses in the Northwest. They've got a power list and they've got a futures list and so on and so forth. And I think that would be really a good thing. Just look it up to see if it's something you might want to be nominated for by a friend or whatever going forwards.
Yeah, fantastic. So what have we got now? 6 more questions. So content as well. We're going to talk about all the different types of content you do. Again, brief answers for this, but we'll start with books first of all. How many books have you published, and how did you become a published author?
Okay, so very quickly, I've always written articles about all sorts of things: gender, social mobility, the law. I've written quite a lot of articles about the law. And just before I was 40, so it was like 2 years ago or a year ago, I can't remember now. But somebody asked me if I would contribute to a book called Fabulous, Inspirational, and Over 40. And my stance for most things was always no. Learning to say no, which I've relearned again now, actually, during lockdown. So I was asked to do it. And the girl who asked me to contribute to it, there was a load of women. I didn't know them. So it was a short chapter, which we did. And I thought, okay, I'll do it. We can raise money for Children's Hospital. So I agreed to do it. And so that kind of was a published author. It wasn't really. I don't talk about that book very often because it's not really my book. I've just written a very short stint. So that came. And then, so I've published, I think, 4 books. Then Talking Law was my next book after that. No, sorry, the book on cybersecurity, which is on the law. No one reads that. It's 135 quid and it's published by Bloomsbury. And unless you really love GDPR, which I'm guessing you don't, put your hand up, you're not going to buy it, right? And you don't write books to make money because I don't see any of that money. But I did enjoy writing that book in a sad way, talking about the law and cybersecurity and GDPR. Anyway, so thereafter, I was giving a speech at KPMG and the audience asked me if I could recommend some good books, sort of professional development, personal development. And I couldn't really think of any. And I'd read, when you get that moment when someone asks you a question and you're like, and if you'd had advance warning, you would say. And then this chap in the audience said, well, why didn't you write one? So I was a bit like, I'm not sure I've got anything to say. Anyway, so eventually I thought, well, I will write a book. It's not out yet. It's called A Sense of Purpose. And they just write about all the stuff we've been talking about here today: goals, energy, authenticity. Not in a sort of self-help coachy way, because I'm not self-helper. I'm not a coach. I'm not qualified. I just talk about the stuff that I found helpful to me and people might want to read. So that's how that came about. Rosie and the Unicorn.
That's the next one, because we can see that in the banner behind you, the other side.
Yeah, it's because
how was that one different? Because obviously you experienced the law, you experienced helping other women in business, but a kids book, that's purely different.
Well, that's due to COVID-19 and the pain of homeschooling. And which we've all experienced. Yes, it's been wonderful having so much time with our lovely children, especially for me personally, having my 3 children. But I have had to work as well and homeschool. And every time I go on a court hearing or a board meeting, my children think it's break. I'm like, no, there's no break on the calendar. Let's go back. So anyway, it became a bit less inspiring. And then the school phoned to say, you've not uploaded many things onto the system. And I hadn't even realized that my daughter, we've all been there, right? They do these well-being calls. And my school's great, the children's school. Anyway, and she said, you've not uploaded much. And I hadn't realized that, the 6-year-olds also needed the uploading as well. I thought it was just my older children. Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay. And I thought, right, I'll show you. This is what we'll do. We'll write a book. We'll raise it for all the brilliant key workers and the NHS who've been looking after all these people. And they'll keep you quiet and they'll speak to me again about uploading stuff. Because we hadn't been doing work, but my work, just not uploading it onto the system. But the true reason why I wrote it was before Black Lives Matter, my daughter actually is the motivation behind the book. We're talking about healthy minds and kind of, what grown-ups can do for children to have healthy minds and adventure and, dreams. And we have a jar called What We'll Do After COVID, the things we do. So we do that every day. And we write gratitude in there. But I just thought, wouldn't it be nice, just to write a storybook? And there was one of a few stories that she wrote. And we talked about, where did the unicorn go? And where did it fly around? And I thought actually now, I think the book is probably quite relevant. It's quite an innocent little book about unicorns. We all love unicorns. I know they're not real, but, we'd all love to go on an adventure, I'm sure, with one. So yeah, a kid's book was never in my repertoire, but homeschooling, gosh, we all need a medal for just getting through. And so that's how that came about. And the 3 charities are NHS, Millions, not just a black hole of the NHS, which of course my parents have worked for, and the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital, which is actually a very good children's hospital, but sometimes I think, other hospitals like Great Ormond Street, somebody's writing unicorns are real. Yes, they are, of course, by the book. And Young Minds, because I think children have been disproportionately affected by the lockdown. I think we all thought it would be the elderly, and of course they are, because I volunteer for a charity where we call every week, you give an hour. But young people and children have, which is strange, given that they've all got mobile phones. My children haven't, they're not allowed, they're too young, but they've got a lot of technology now. And so, that's why it's for those 3 charities. And
fantastic. And you mentioned then, you hinted on that obviously children have been adversely affected and obviously they've really suffered on this, but obviously also adults have. And you've done it. You've got your AllFM show, which is, I think it's changed over the years, because when I appeared on your show, it was just generally let's meet businesses in the local area. Now it's sort of gone down into loneliness and isolation. Why did you add radio into the mix generally?
Well, it's still businesses. So look, when we start recording properly, people want to come. It's got 25,000 listeners. Can you believe that? Because it's a drive time show. It's still that. But loneliness and isolation. Do you remember Jo Cox, the MP who was killed and murdered? Well, she believed that we had more in common than divided us. And so I just thought that message really, resonated with me. Actually, that we have, I know we talk about race and gender and all the other protected characteristics, but generally we have got more in common than divides us. And so the radio was just a bit of fun, really. I set it up, not the radio, AllFM's been going for years, and they've got lots of great people on there. And I volunteered there because I really wanted to bring people from different communities, and Alex has of course been in there. And it's a bit like Desert Island Disc. But I do feel that there's a high amount of loneliness in the community and isolation. And people, pre-COVID even, because it was pre-COVID, are not getting out. And there is a fear about meeting strangers. And often we don't want to. We don't want to meet people we don't know, And it's all such an effort to meet people you have to talk to. But at the very least, you can sit in the comfort of your house and listen to somebody talking about it on the radio. And so that's how that came about, really. But also, I feel that people don't really have safe groups that they can go to and be themselves. I know this is a business group, but I bet you when you all met in person, it was quite nice. You could have a nice chat. You find out about people's dogs, cats, children. And I just feel that we're missing a bit of that, actually. So, the radio was really having inspirational people with extraordinary lives, because I think there's more to everyone than meets the eye. And that's the premise of that radio show, really. So, yeah, lovely. If you want to come on, email me. There's a bit of a backlog because I just haven't had time as much, but we're doing pre-record, so they'll just be released, and you've got to choose 3 pieces of music. Alex, does that answer the last question?
That's answered the sort of, yeah. There's a couple more questions. So you obviously done radio, then you turned it into, you've got a Talking Law podcast as well, which is going very well as well.
Yeah.
So tell us more about Talking Law podcast. It's another string to your bow.
Well, that was just an accident, really. I think of all the things I do, that's something that I'm really quite proud of. The podcast, the legal profession doesn't look like me, and it doesn't look like my household. And I think there's a fear about people entering it. You can be an ordinary white kid and enter. It's okay. But even then, I think it's important just to talk to people who made it in law. And so the podcast came by accident. I gave a podcast interview. I'd wanted to do one for a while, but didn't know how. And then Sam Walker, who used to work at the BBC as a journalist, I gave an interview for her on a podcast called, I think it's called Game Changers. I can't remember. And so she said, have you thought about a podcast? I said, yes. And then she was like, well, you'd be really good, blah, blah, blah. And so I just write the questions that I want to be answered, like who inspired you? Who's your favorite fictional lawyer? What's your favorite book? Why did you enter the law? And why isn't law diverse? What can we do to help more women? So it's kind of like, the stuff that I think I want to find out. And it's not all lawyers. And if I may say so, even if you have no interest in the law whatsoever, you can listen and get tips. And so I'm proud of it because it's reached 19,000 listeners. So whatever rubbish I'm spouting must be doing something right. And so, yeah, I'm proud of them in that sense. And I think it's important for all of us to find out who is in the law, what have they got to say, and how things are different to them. But it's not all about law, to be honest. No. We only talk about the law.
Fantastic. So I'm gonna put the last 2 questions together because I think that they're relevant. Obviously, we just mentioned all the things that you do. So obviously we need to talk about, obviously we're all running businesses here. We've all got so many plates that we're spinning. So I think we need to talk one about obviously time management and probably one big takeaway tip for that. And then obviously you've already done a lot, but what more in life do you want to do? So time management and what more do you want to do? It's the last question.
Time management, I'm not great at it. If I haven't met up with you or we've had a Zoom or whatever, I know, I see Asha's on there. Hi, Asha. She'll know, I'm not great at it because when I'm in court, that time is not mine. Court cases have a life of their own. Everything else I do is in my spare time when my kids are in bed, when I get up early. So therefore, for me to actually meet up with people or whatever else, it's a lot and there's got to be a value. So I've kind of learned that quite late on. And so what I would say generally is only do the stuff you enjoy. Life really is too short. And when you've got your business, run your business as well as you can, but don't let it just be you. My life cannot just be the law at all. I love the law. I've written about it. I practice it, blah, blah, blah. But my life cannot be just the law. And I applaud you to do the same because well-being is key. And the burnout rate for women in business is high. It's significantly high. So we need to find clever ways to keep going. And some of that means fun. I mean, I see Helen's on there as well. Helen will probably be able to give us more of that. But we need to really look after ourselves. And look, if your business isn't going as well as you'd like at different times, then decide that actually move sideways or do something a bit different and come to it. But don't let it burn it out. Don't let the businesses run you, which we actually all can be guilty of when we set up things and organizations that suddenly we're not in control. The business is running us. That's okay if it's going really, really well and you've planned in breaks. But it's not okay if it's just running you and actually you're not getting an output. So time management, like everyone else, I'm not brilliant at, but I am learning a lot better. So certain times then I'm not working. August, whatever. Friday nights are sacred nights with my children, unless there's something I can't get out of. And so I just book blocks in my diary now for looking after myself, because actually, I got shingles sometime last year. It's nothing big. I didn't have a mental breakdown. I know there's lots of people who've had those issues, but shingles. And, you know, it was shocked me so much because I just carried on. I couldn't put my coat on. It was in one arm. And I thought it was my handbag was too heavy. So then I used, like, you know, a handbag from 1985, a Mulberry one, which was light. I still couldn't put my coat on. All of this arm. And actually, that was my body. And I had to go to Mayfair to go to a solicitor's office to deal with the case. And the doctor was like, you need to just sleep. You can't go. I was like, don't be ridiculous. You know, I've got, you know, my diary is booked out. And I just had to do that. I just had to go, no, I'm not doing that. So in terms of time management, I think I've answered the question, but I think we all just owe it to ourselves. It's okay to sit in the garden and listen to birds. I've been doing that in lockdown. And when your phone rings, don't answer it. When people want to meet you with virtual coffees on Zoom. No, there was a thing called a phone that we all had. We don't need to see each other. Suddenly, everyone's like, let's have a coffee on Zoom. No, it's okay for that sometimes, right? There's a thing called a telephone. Yeah, I remember it. Let's use that instead. And don't have to like feel like we need to brush our hair all the time to be on Zoom. No. So I've learned that kind of, if I may say so, the harder way. And so I applaud us all to do that, really, just to get a bit cleverer with our time, because it's not infinite. And indeed, I just think the burnout's around the corner. And then what's next?
One last thing. What more in life do you want to do? What ambitions have you got to fulfill?
Well, God, I don't really think about that. But I suppose if there were three things, I think I'd like to be a QC. I'd probably like to be a judge actually at some point, because we don't have enough women judges, and we certainly don't have enough minority judges. Not because I'm a black woman, because I'm bloody good at what I do, and not because I've done too much. But I think the representation and visibility is important, just as we need more women on boards. So, you know, even if I don't do any of those things, I'd probably like to get on more footsie boards. Because can you imagine if they made me a judge, or I was on the board of some high-flying company? I'd be like, Helen, Tasmin, Avril, come and sit with me for a week, see how it works. Now you need to be getting on these boards. You need to be applying. You know, Nick Brown, Kelly, yeah, are your kids interested in the law? Yep, come and sit with me for a week, observe, it's a public court, and see it. That's not being controversial. It's just thinking about the new ways to embrace what the future could look like. So I think, if I was honest with myself, God, that's quite a deep question, isn't it? I think those things, but then if I do those things, then I probably won't be able to come on Zoom calls with all of you like Melis, because, you know, there are structures. So yeah, maybe, but I'd actually just like to have a healthy, happy family, you know, with my children as well. And my hubby, who has to tolerate a lot of things, you know. So if you asked him about homeschooling, he wouldn't be able to tell you. But it's just like, he wrote a book. I'm like, yeah, that's what we've been doing during homeschooling. Yeah, I know you're not here. You carry on with your work. Yes, I'm dealing with murders and companies breaching the law. Yep. So, you know, I think I would, if I was honest, I'd like those things, and I'd like to have a happy, healthy family, and give where I can.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thanks for your time, Sally. As I said, we could have talked for probably 2 hours. Quite easily. We've talked about so much. We've talked about, obviously, women in law. We talked about diversity. We talked about raising the visibility. We've talked about time management. We've talked about so much. So thank you for your time, Sally.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's really good. I don't know, have we run out of time for questions?